Imagine trying to follow smoke through a forest. Imagine trying to map the path of lightning before it strikes. Imagine trying to predict the move of someone who decided 3 moves ago to make no move at all. There is a type of mind that cannot be traced. Not because it is hiding. Not because it is playing games. Not because it has anything to conceal. But because the architecture of how it thinks, the pathways, the connections, the jumps and silences, simply does not follow the routes that most minds use. To an ordinary observer, this mind looks quiet. To a trained observer, it looks dangerous. Because a thought process that cannot be traced cannot be predicted. And a mind that cannot be predicted cannot be manipulated. And a person who cannot be manipulated is the one thing that every toxic system, every controlling person, every manipulative dynamic, is fundamentally unable to handle. This video is about the 7 signs that you have this mind. Not as a compliment, as a recognition. Because, if you have it, you already know the cost of carrying it. Sign 1. You think in conclusions, not conversations. Imagine a chess grandmaster who announces checkmate on move 3. Not because they got lucky. Because by move 3, they had already played the entire game in their head. The untraceable mind does not think out loud. Most people process socially. They talk through their thinking. They share their reasoning as it develops. They perform the journey of arriving at a conclusion because the performance is how they process. The untraceable mind arrives at conclusions before the conversation begins. The silence is not absence. It is the sound of processing that already happened, somewhere private, somewhere unreachable, somewhere no one was invited. When they finally speak, they speak in conclusions. And the people around them are still on move 1. The conclusion was never the beginning of their thinking. It was always the end. Sign 2. You detect patterns before they complete. Imagine seeing the shape of a wave forming 20 meters out while everyone else is still watching the water lie flat. The untraceable mind does not wait for patterns to finish. It detects them mid-formation. It reads the first 2% of a behavioral sequence and already knows where the final 98 is going. This is not intuition in the mystical sense. This is the product of a nervous system that has been scanning for inconsistency, reading subtext, tracking behavioral patterns, since long before it had a name for what it was doing. When someone is about to betray them, they already know. When a situation is about to become unsafe, they already feel it. When a relationship is performing connection rather than living it, they have already registered the gap. They don't announce this. They just quietly adjust. And the pattern finishes exactly where they knew it would. And they are already somewhere else. Sign 3. You hold information like a vault. Imagine a library that has no index. You know every book inside it. You know where every page is. But no one who enters can find anything. Because the filing system lives only in your head and nowhere else. The untraceable mind has accumulated enormous amounts of observation, analysis, and conclusion about every person and situation around it. It shares none of this. Not because it is secretive for the sake of it, but because it learned, early and permanently, that information shared is leverage given. That the moment you reveal what you know, you reveal how you think. And the moment they know how you think, they can predict your moves. So the vault stays closed. They sit in conversations knowing 10 times more about the dynamic than anyone realizes. They answer questions that were never asked, inside their own head, while responding to the question that was asked with something completely unmappable. Where do you work? Around. How was your weekend? Fine. What are you thinking? Nothing. The vault is full. The door is closed. And the key is not for lending. Sign 4. Your silence is not empty. Imagine the space between two chess moves as the most dangerous place on the board. Most people fill silence because silence is uncomfortable. They talk to fill the gap. They explain to fill the gap. They perform certainty to fill the gap. Because in their experience, silence means nothing is happening. For the untraceable mind, silence is where everything happens. The silence before they respond is not hesitation. It is processing at a speed and depth that would look strange if it were visible. The silence during a conversation is not disengagement. It is the reading of every subtext, every micro-shift. In posture, every gap between what was said and what was meant. The silence after a betrayal is not forgiveness. It is the quiet filing of information that will be acted on at a time of their own choosing. They have never been the loudest person in the room. They have always been the most informed. Sign 5. You think in systems, not stories. Imagine being able to see the blueprint of a building while everyone else is describing what color the walls are. The ordinary mind thinks in narratives. He said this. She did that. Then this happened. Then I felt that. The story is the unit of thinking. The untraceable mind thinks in systems. It doesn't ask what happened. It asks why the structure produces this outcome. It doesn't analyze the individual interaction. It analyzes the pattern of interactions that made this one inevitable. It sees the incentive beneath the behavior, the wound beneath the performance, the pattern beneath the incident, the architecture beneath the story. This is why they are so hard to argue with, not because they are stubborn, but because they are not arguing about the event. They are arguing about the system that produced the event. And most people have never looked at the system. They are still describing the walls. The untraceable mind already knows the load-bearing structure. Sign 6. You cannot be led by emotion alone. Imagine a compass that cannot be thrown off by magnets. Every manipulation tactic, at its core, is an attempt to hijack the target's emotional state and use it to produce a desired behavior. Make them angry, they do something impulsive. Make them afraid, they become compliant. Make them guilty, they become obligated. Make them infatuated, they become controllable. The untraceable mind experiences emotion. It feels things, deeply, sometimes more deeply than most. But it does not root decision-making through emotion. The emotion is registered, processed, filed, and then the decision is made through a separate pathway. One that the emotional hijacker cannot access because they don't even know it exists. The manipulator pulls the anger lever. The untraceable mind feels the anger, and then steps around it to make the decision it was always going to make. The compass doesn't stop working when the magnet arrives. It simply accounts for the interference. Sign 7. You are already past the conversation you are in. Imagine a river that has already mapped its own course before it reaches the canyon. While others are still reacting, while they are in the feeling, in the argument, in the moment, they, untraceable mind is already somewhere after it. They respond to what is said, but they have already processed what comes next. They engage with the present situation, but they have already assessed what this situation reveals about the future. They sit in the conversation, but they left it 3 exchanges ago. This is not dissociation. This is not avoidance. This is a mind that processes at a speed and depth that the current moment cannot fully occupy. And here is where the cost lives. Because a mind that is always partially in the future, always processing what the present moment means, for what comes after, is a mind that is rarely fully at rest. It is exhausting to carry. It is lonely to have. And it is extraordinarily difficult to explain to anyone who doesn't have it. But here is what the untraceable thought process gives you in return. You cannot be predicted. You cannot be manipulated. You cannot be cornered by logic that doesn't account. 4 moves ahead. You cannot be fooled by performance because you already saw through it before it. finished forming. Imagine trying to follow smoke through a forest. You gave up trying to make yourself followable a long time ago. The smoke doesn't apologize for not staying in one place. It just moves. And it keeps distance from everything that tried to trap it. If this reached you, share it with someone whose mind no one has ever been able to read. Tell me in the comments, what is the sign that hit you hardest? I read every single one.